As we close out today's magazine, be sure to make a simple but powerful choice today. Add more fiber-rich foods to your plate and take an active step toward reducing your risk of colon cancer. Join us again tomorrow for another lineup geared towards providing you with information on the government's policies and initiatives for building a better Jamaica. You may visit our website, jis.gov.jm, to rewatch this show or to catch up on the others we have on the site. I'm Theodore Henry, telling you thanks for watching from our production team here at the JIS.
This has been a production of the Jamaica Information Service, the voice of Jamaica.
Tonight on Lead Story, we begin with a national security paradox. Jamaica is seizing more illegal firearms than at any point in its history. Yet, the flow of guns into the country continues. The police and military are intercepting shipments hidden in everything, from water heaters to industrial equipment. But if we're catching so many weapons, what does that say about the number that may still be entering the country? Tonight, we examine the pipeline and whether the real battle is not just seizing guns, but stopping them from entering Jamaica in the first place. Then, a diplomatic and human rights flashpoint. More than 5 decades of cooperation between Jamaica's medical partnership with Cuba and that nation has ended. 277 Cuban medical professionals are now being withdrawn. But the question now is not just about healthcare capacity. If some of those doctors don't want to return to Cuba, does Jamaica have a responsibility to protect them? And why are we having this conversation about Cuban doctors while Haitian migrants are so often detained and repatriated? Later, 6 years after COVID-19 was declared a global pandemic, the virus may have subsided, but the social and psychological aftershocks are still with us. We speak with the consultant psychiatrist about long COVID, unresolved grief, and what some are now calling the COVID generation. And finally, we take you all the way to Asunción, Paraguay, where the Inter-American Development Bank Group is holding its annual meetings. Conversations that will shape how countries like Jamaica finance development in the years ahead. I'm Jodianne Quarry, and this is Lead Story. Jamaica has recorded some of its largest ever firearm seizures in recent months, including a major interception last year of more than 200 guns hidden inside a water heater. Customs and law enforcement officials say new scanning technology and intelligence-led targeting have dramatically increased detections. But that success also raises a hard question. If we're finding this many guns, how many guns are we not finding? Joining us now is Senior Superintendent Dennis Brooks from the Jamaica Constabulary Force, and he'll be joining us in a few moments inside Lead Story to talk to us about these major gun finds. I'll bring you back all the way to May of last year because that was a massive find. A find that worked with several branches of the Jamaican government, including law enforcement and Jamaica Customs. The number of weapons that they found, over 200. Pieces of ammunition, initial reports were 20,000 pieces of ammunition, with some figures going as high as 40,000. That was a massive find, the largest in Jamaican history. However, we haven't heard much about it afterwards, and there have been now concerns about the people getting picked up after major finds like those. What are they now doing? Are they attempting to import or even successfully importing major arms finds like these? We're also aware that Jamaica has knowledge that the United States is where most of our guns come from. States with liberal jurisdictions that allow for easier acquisitions of guns, like Florida and Georgia, are places where these guns often come from. And as a result, those places are where individuals are more likely to bribe persons with clean criminal records to purchase guns on their behalf. Those are straw guns, those that are bought by individuals who don't plan on using them inside the United States and instead send them along to Jamaica to create havoc and mayhem. Helping us now understand the work that's being put in by the Jamaica Constabulary Force, along with partner organizations like the military and Jamaica Customs, we have with us inside Lead Story, Senior Superintendent Dennis Brooks from the Jamaica Constabulary Force. SSB Brooks, thanks so much for joining us inside Lead Story.
Always a pleasure to join you and your viewers. Good evening to you.
Good evening. Jamaica is seizing more firearms than ever before, including that landmark interception of more than 200 weapons inside, of all places, that water heater in last May. The Jamaica Constabulary Force's own statistics show that seizures have increased by double digits in consecutive years. But here's a counterintuitive question. Does that success mean the state is winning the battle against illegal guns? Or does a rising seizure rate actually suggest the pipeline into the country is even larger than we think, and we're only catching a fraction of what's coming in?
Very good question. What I would say in response is that we, through intelligence gathering and increased and improved intelligence capabilities, are increasingly able to make interventions. We also, through partnerships with our collaborators like Jamaica Customs has become increasingly efficient at what it does. It's a contactless clearance process. It's non-invasive inspection process has improved. The quality of its scanning capacity has improved. And so we are getting better at doing so. So in getting better at detecting and seizing these things, we are now faced with the reality that maybe what we've always believed, we have greater empirical evidence to point to where and what these guns look like coming into the country. I'm not going to say too much about what we know or what we believe about the quantum, but I do feel, based on the reports that I've seen, based on conversations that I've had, is that the capacity has improved so much that we are seeing the fruits of our labor now in terms of our ability to make these seizures.
And that state capacity issue is always going to be one that we have in our minds. But that increased capacity is going to matter because the May 2025 seizure exposed just how sophisticated these trafficking methods have become. They're hiding it in industrial methods, industrial vehicles, you have coordinated logistics, and what appears to be knowledge, advanced knowledge of customs protocols. SSP Brooks, are criminal networks now innovating faster than our border technology and intelligence can respond?
Well, I mean, criminologists have long spoken to the modernization of criminal organizations. And in the modernization of criminal organizations, and in the advancement that we have seen, remember that these entities are not limited by procurement guidelines. These entities are not limited by regulations on how they can spend money. They have advantages and they are not encumbered in some of the ways that public sector entities are encumbered. And so that has always been a factor in terms of the rate of modernization and the rate of spend that criminal organizations are willing to engage in. What we have seen is that successive administrations and particularly more recently have decided to empower the relevant state agencies and departments and ministries to go after these modernizing criminal entities. And from a JCF perspective, I think that we have been an entity that have been modernizing and transforming more rapidly than ever in our past. That has allowed us to be able to go toe-to-toe in various areas, and which is why we see crime trending in the way that it is. So there is an importance for entities to modernize. But I would also say, again, I can mention Customs and the Jamaica Defense Force. They have been on their own modernization and transformation agenda as well, and they have spoken about it. I mean, if you have them on, I'm sure they will speak about their own modernization and transformation process. And so I wouldn't say that criminal organizations are modernizing faster than us. I think that we are now in the modern Jamaica, a country that is showing that we have the capacity to track down these shipments with greater efficiency. There are problems. There still are. I'm not going to say that we are, where we want to be. And there are things. There is room for greater improvement. But I would say that significant strides have been made.
I think those strides are going to be so important as persons watch then the work of the JCF, the Jamaica Defense Force and Customs, as you have made very clear. Everybody, have procurement guidelines for bad men and criminals, but they're certainly coming against a coordinated effort here in Jamaica to make sure that they keep things out. Quickly before we go, Dennis Brooks, if you could change one thing, one policy, one piece of legislation, one international agreement, what would have the greatest impact on reducing the flow of illegal firearms into Jamaica?
I'm trying not to say anything too controversial. We have to have a greater impact on the supply side, the source. We have to have a greater, and we continue to have a great impact, and we continue the relationships with our international stakeholders to make those. To dry up those channels from which they emerge. We've heard our leaders, and I've seen bilateral talks take place to that effect that speak to clamping down on the source.
And I think, let me say the controversial thing for you then, SSP Brooks. We know that they come from the United States. We've seen legislation from the U.S. taking responsibility for that. Those sorts of partnerships, especially as guns are easier to get in some states like Florida and Georgia, mean that they end up on our shores and become our problem. But you've made it very clear tonight that the JCF, the Jamaica Defense Force, and Customs has an eye out keeping us all safe. Senior Superintendent of Police Dennis Brooks from the Jamaica Constabulary Force, thank you for spending time with us this evening inside Lead Story.
My pleasure.
All right. That's an important bit of conversation for us. How do you stay safe? But next, we have a conversation now about the Cuban doctors. We've been talking about them leaving Jamaica, but do they have to? And if they want to stay, what happens next? A whole human rights unraveling up next inside Lead Story.
Every day starts with care. Care that's always close. Supermed Family of Pharmacies is where you go for everything you need. From your morning routine to life's biggest moments. Supermed Family of Pharmacies is always by your side. Whether it's prescriptions or household essentials, trust the care that's close to home. Super happy, super healthy, Supermed.
Jamaica's unemployment rate has fallen to 3.3%, down from 13.2% in 2016. Our government's continued focus on job creation is delivering real results. We are building Jamaica. The time by the Office of the Prime Minister is...
Every dream conquered is another dream gained. I land and I fly again like a jet plane. Headed straight in your direction, 'cause I'm wiser, one step closer. I'm winning 'cause I work so hard. And the music keeps on playing, and the people never say we are mash up the night. Oh, what a feeling, don't stop dreaming. Keep on believing in the power of the feeling. Whatever you want, take a chance. Song in your heart, step in your dance. You got a spark, don't fit it dark. Shine your lights out.
For more than 50 years, Cuban doctors have been part of Jamaica's public health system, particularly in rural communities where specialist care can be difficult to access. But that partnership has now come to an abrupt end. The government has confirmed that the long-standing cooperation agreement with Cuba has been terminated, and 277 medical professionals are now being recalled. This comes after a series of statements from the government last week, a response from the Cuban government, and additional clarifications by the Jamaican government over the weekend, explaining why Jamaica could no longer continue the arrangement under its current terms. The question now is then, what happens next? If some of those doctors do not want to return to Cuba, particularly in light of reports of pressure on those who defy their government, what are Jamaica's legal and human rights obligations? Joining us now is human rights advocate Carla Guyotta, who serves now as Executive Director of Stand Up for Jamaica. Carla Guyotta, thanks so much for joining us.
Good evening to you. Good evening to everybody. Thanks so much for having me.
Now, Stand Up for Jamaica has sent out a press release on this issue, but the government of Jamaica has now issued multiple statements explaining why this program with Cuba has ended, citing concerns about the terms of the arrangement, including how the Cuban government structured the payment and deployment of its own medical personnel. Now, this program has been in place for more than 50 years, and 277 specialists are now being called back to Cuba. So is the real question then no longer whether the program should continue, because it's not going to, but what happens to the doctors now who are being recalled?
This is a good question because the problem has different aspects which need to be considered. You mentioned something which is very important. This deal, an agreement between Jamaica and Cuba, it is since 50 years. So it's not something which is new and something which has not been experienced through the years. I share the fact that all rules and regulations should be respected, that there must be a formal protocol. But why for 50 years nobody has been raising this issue, and then suddenly in the space of a few days we have almost 300 nurses and doctors leaving Jamaica. It is something which is surprising, because I think that 50 years of relationship should have ensured that the two countries, Cuba and Jamaica, were following all protocols, and if there was something to be in need to rectify, they could have sit around the table, discuss it, and find a mediation. Second item, which is extremely concerning, what's going to happen to the health services in Jamaica. We know that most of the doctors are specialists. I'm talking about eye care, I'm talking about dentists, I'm talking about orthopedic, etc. And the service that they offered to Jamaica was a high quality one. How to replace it in such a short time? Third, I would love also to consider an element as a human rights defendant. In this moment, Cuba is suffering for an unprecedented humanitarian crisis. So my question is, do you think that those going back home, they will get a job? I doubt it. I doubt it, because I was looking at the reports and the footage. There is no light, no water, no food, no oil, no gas. It's not the best way for somebody to go back to his country. It remains a huge problem. The problem is why it happened now. It happened now because suddenly Jamaica and Cuba won't agree on a collaboration, a cooperation, which is a very good service and well needed, or it is happening now because there are pressures towards all the CARICOM countries coming from the United States. It is not Jamaica alone which has a challenging situation. I saw the same kind of request towards all the CARICOM countries. Some of them say, yes, we will send them back. Some of them said, no, we won't send them back. Some of them say, maybe yes, maybe no. But what it remains as a huge reason of concern is the fact that an external entity, an external government, has decided what it is, the political arena and the social arena for all Caribbean countries.
Carlo Ghiatta, it might not just be the United States getting involved, though. From 2019, we had a UN human rights report that indicated that the Cuban medical brigades were likely to be forced labor-like conditions. The OAS in 2019 said this was likely to be forced labor-like conditions. The United States has said in trafficking in persons, these people were trafficked because they did not have access to their passports, could not go around as they wished, and the Cuban government took 70 to 90% of their salaries. I put that as the first part, and now to the third thing of what you said, which is if they get sent back home, what are the conditions they're going to be sent back home under? You talked about no electricity, thanks to now the sanctions that have intensified from the United States, and now the more difficult circumstances. Put all that together. If a doctor here from Cuba says they don't want to return to that country because they fear consequences at home, does that mean that Jamaica has a responsibility to assess international protection? Because we have documented cases of Cuban professionals who have said they faced consequences, loss of employment, loss of housing rights, and restrictions on family members that they have said upon returning home after defecting from these international missions.
As I said, it is a quite delicate situation, and I don't think it should be taken as a simple decision. But my idea, maybe I'm a simple person, is that those countries, those two countries, they should sit down and discuss and find a dialogue and find a mediation to avoid damages to both sides. For example, one of the big problems is not that the Cubans were involved in human trafficking, but the Cubans are required by Cuba to give 1/3 of their salary to the country, Cuba. That money is going to be used to offer a sort of free health service for Cubans.
If they have
So
now
it
given 2/3 to almost the entirety of that, does that violate then these principles that the Cuban missions would have started with? Because under trafficking in persons legislation, this and Jamaica's law, 2007 Trafficking in Persons Act says we don't care what good reasons you have. Once a person has been trafficked, they don't have control to be able to leave. They are under forced labor-like conditions. We don't care what good thing that they could have been organizing to do. We have a responsibility now to these victims.
Well, according to my information, it is 1/3. And I spoke to several of them because some of them came to my office as a human rights office seeking for assistance, which I am not able to grant in my position because I don't have the power to do so. So according to what I heard, the amount of money that they give back is not 2/3, is 1/3. But what I wanted to say is how for 50 years this relationship was going on without any form of doubt, any form of concern, any form of critics, and then suddenly within 3 weeks the situation became unbearable. I think that such a long relationship should have been going through the years with controls, with reviews.
And the knowledge then that we wouldn't just discover this effectively in year 50.
Suddenly.
But Carlo Guiotta, this issue cannot be examined without confronting an uncomfortable comparison, because Haitian migrants arriving in Jamaican waters are routinely detained and repatriated, often within days, sometimes even hours after arriving. And Haiti remains in the grip of gang violence so severe that the UN Security Council has authorized a multinational security support mission. Why should Jamaicans' response to Cuban medical professionals seeking to remain be any different from its response to the Haitians coming here to seek protection? They're both right above us.
I could ask you the same question. Why do Jamaica send back the Asians anytime they touch the shore with a little boat in small numbers without having the right to get an attorney, to get medical care, to be assessed, to verify if they are criminals, or they are escaping the terrible situation from Haiti? I think that this question, as raised by Stand Up and myself more than once, there are rights for migrants, right? And there is a huge difference if somebody is a human trafficker or somebody is a child which is coming to Jamaica and is 3 years old, and I really doubt that he is a criminal. And there are international standards which have been signed by Jamaica, which somehow draft the protocol to be followed for them instead of being sent back in the night on another boat without having access to an attorney, to anybody. Stand Up has been following several of these cases, especially the ones in Portland, and I was very surprised to see that none of the mitigation rules that should have controlled their access or their refusal to Jamaica were set in place properly.
And I think
so
that is certainly something
about the Cubans.
Yes.
I answer you Are we going to do the same to the Cubans?
And then this is something, because is it a matter that we need these skills from the Cubans? Is it a broader question about humanitarian need that might pull in the Haitians as well, or security concerns that we have to pay attention to? But certainly we'll be continuing to look and watch this issue, Carla Giotta, as we continue to parse out how Jamaica responds. Thanks so much for joining us, Carla Giotta, Executive Director.
You are very welcome.
Stand
Enjoy
Up for Jamaica. Enjoy your evening as well. We're continuing to keep you up to date on what's going on. And today inside Lead Story, we're marking 6 years since COVID-19 began. Today is the anniversary of that. How has your life changed? We'll deep dive into that next inside Lead Story.
Delve deep into the issues. We'll take you beneath the surface.
Greetings and salutations. My name is Orville Higgins, and it's another edition of Fan Central.
Talking to the people at the heart of the top sporting stories. Hear from your favorite sportsmen and women and the administrators who work tirelessly to make it all happen. It's live sports talk.
I've written an entire article.
Yes.
Looking at all the major issues every Tuesday at 9 p.m. It's Fan Central.
Jamaica, make we do the right thing. Make we live good today for a better tomorrow. Talk it out. Don't fight it out. The time by the Ministry of National Security is
6:30.
Every dream conquered is another dream gained. I land and I fly again like a jet plane. Headed straight in your direction, 'cause I'm wiser, one step closer. I'm winning 'cause I work so hard. And the music keeps on playing, and the people them I say we are mash up the dance. Oh, what a feeling! Don't stop dreaming. Keep on believing in the power of the feeling. Whatever you want, take a chance. Song in your heart, step in your dance. You got a spark, don't fit it down. Shine your lights
Today marks 6 years since the World Health Organization declared COVID-19 a global pandemic. The virus changed how we worked, how we learned, and how we related to each other. But even as daily life has returned to something approaching normality, many of the consequences of the pandemic are still with us. From long COVID to the psychological effects of loss, isolation, and social disruption. To help us now figure it all out, we're joined by Dr. Winston Delahaye, consultant psychiatrist. Hello, Dr. Delahaye, and welcome to Lead Story.
Thanks for inviting me.
6 years after the pandemic was declared, has society fully processed the trauma of what happened during COVID-19, Dr. Delahaye?
Absolutely not. We continue to struggle. I mean, these are major events, globally, and for us as well. In addition to that, just as we're getting a grip of, in a manner of speaking, of that situation, we then have another traumatic event, and then more recently, Melissa. So it's one thing after another. But be that as it may, specifically the COVID-related issues, well known, well accepted, long COVID continues to linger. All of us had friends who we lost. I'm sure you probably did as well. I certainly did. And so those are significant traumatic events for families to deal with, for the country to deal with. In fact, it wasn't just individuals, so individuals were affected, but it was a national crisis. And so those are not things that you recover from with ease, even with the most resources that you'd have available.
we became a country that became accustomed to masks. We became a country that became accustomed to hearing about things like long COVID, the long-term impacts of COVID-19, even for those persons who had mild symptoms. But long COVID and its mental health effects are something that we're looking at now. What does the science tell us about the psychological impact of these sort of long-term impacts of COVID-19? If you got something 3 years ago, even 6 years ago, and you still have to live with that today.
Sure. In fact, I was very close to it. So we had a team from psychiatry, the Department of Psychiatry at the University Hospital. I was a psychiatrist on the team with help from psychologists and our residents in training in psychiatry. So we were directly engaged with persons, not just physicians, nurses, anybody at all who needed assistance. We provided that service. And so that really went through the length and breadth of the teams. The main diagnoses that we saw, and this is global, confirmed, would be depression, anxiety disorders, and of course, post-traumatic stress disorder. So especially post-traumatic stress disorder doesn't disappear one day to the next. So this requires, continued management, continued treatment. And if an individual suffers, is struggling, any death is 100% for that person and their family. So you want no deaths. Unfortunately, and the term we use is case fatality rate. So we had about, let's say, 160,000 confirmed cases, of which we had about approximately 4,000 deaths. So that's a case fatality rate of about 2.5%. Again, even if it was 0.1%, if your family member dies, that's traumatic for you. The point is, a lot of persons passed as a result of that, primarily persons who are elderly with chronic diseases, but that's the bulk of the cost to our society of medical care that we provide. The chronic diseases, hypertension, diabetes, cardiovascular diseases, and those haven't gone. And so we continue to struggle with that. The long COVID, well established. The persons with COVID had about a 4 to 6 times likelihood of having a mental illness compared with those who didn't. And about roughly about a third, about 30-40% of persons affected had some mental illness, which they didn't have before, or if they had before, exacerbation of that illness as a result of the COVID infection.
I think that's so important you put that on the table as well, because people coming out of the pandemic said that they felt different. They felt something was off. They felt something was going on. But we didn't have a lot of language around that. A big thing that you've spoken about, though, Dr. Delahaye, is that the pandemic in Jamaica collided with a culture in which communal grieving, the night, the funeral, the gathering of the family was central to how loss was processed. But during this time, we had so many losses and none of that sort of ritual. We didn't have them because it was forbidden for much of 2020 and 2021. How do Jamaicans now in 2026 who lost a family member, a friend, but didn't get to do those final funeral rites so that they could, some would say go down good, allow for them to show and pay those final respects? How do you deal with that unresolved grief and how does it manifest years later?
With difficulty. So generally speaking, as a culture, we're not really psychology oriented, not yet. But in terms of the provision of the services, all clinics have mental health facilities, some more so than others, and these are larger clinics. All regions have them. So the services are provided. It's really getting persons, and you can't go into each home to say, you seem affected, why don't you come and visit me tomorrow? It doesn't really work like that. So it's through public education that we have persons recognize that you could be struggling. If it is that you had COVID, a family member had COVID, more so even died, or one or more, then we would recommend that you come in for an assessment. That's how we go about it. And so I think by and large, by now, 6 years later, persons are well aware. It doesn't mean they've all come in. And you can have depression for 6 and 10 and 20 and 30 years. If it's not identified and not appropriately managed, then it will continue and worsen with the risk of suicide and so on. So we continue to struggle with that. I think more so because there are more of us now. So in my time in training, that's almost 30 years ago at the University of the West Indies, we had 6 of us in the whole program. We now have 16, at times 17. So that's a big difference. We're training more people. Do we need more? Absolutely. But we're having more services out there. We are on the airwaves, and I hear them too, I'm sure you do, really reaching out to persons to say, hey, if you're having a struggle, here's a number. So we have those things, hotlines and so on, clinics readily available. More so, there's no cost for care in terms of the point of service, in terms of payments, and there are also private facilities. So I think in terms of the provision of services that's available, I'm not aware of any medication shortage, and I've been around a long time. Have there been times when we have less than we need of some things? Maybe. But overall, these are areas that we've really been able to cover and facilitate access to mental health care in this country. Does it need to be more? Yes. And so it's not with ease that you provide the services based on the anticipated or assessed prevalence of mental illness. I think there's a lot more to be done, but we're definitely on the right track, I think.
I think it's important that you highlighted that the access that persons would have to health, especially as they are going through some delayed grief or processing this prolonged impact on their lives. But let's talk about our children now, because educators across Jamaica have described a cohort of students now between the ages of roughly 10 and 18 whose formative years were defined by school closures and social isolation, and in many cases, household economic collapse. Beyond the economic gap that we often talk about, Dr. Delahaye, what are the psychological and developmental consequences for a generation of children whose socialization was interrupted at this incredibly critical stage?
This was major, and we recognize this, and by virtue of seeing patients come into our clinics, into our emergency rooms. We just happened coincidentally to have had a number of persons in training, along with myself, from a particular high school that I attended. Each person in training, you're required to do a research project. So we went ahead and did a research project at this particular high school, which shall remain nameless. And we really thought that the isolation created by COVID, the work from home, this particular school had the ability one day to the next, literally, to continue online. So there was any lack of provision of care, but you were doing it from home, less supervision and so on. Things like substance use went up for all age ranges. The National Council on Drug Abuse has studied this: alcohol use, cocaine use, and cannabis use. So we examined all those things at this particular high school. But let me tell you, the results, we anticipated the results being high and of concern. They were alarming. And this is not the least resourced high school in the country. And so we think if we could extrapolate, and in terms of the statistical component of this study we did, a regular ethical approval from the University of West Indies, as you would expect. So we could have extrapolated to the whole population of this school, and we're hovering around 70% major depressive disorder.
Of children, these are now high school age children.
Students, ages from grade 1 to 13, hovering around the 40% with suicidal ideation is the term we use, meaning harm. That's alarming. And so, that really means if you're seeing 2-3 students on that tree, probably 1 or 2 of them having thoughts of self-harm.
Dr. Delahaye, that is heavy and weighty for a country 6 years on to look at. But just before we go, I want to talk about the people who put their bodies on the front line. Those healthcare workers or frontline workers, doctors and nurses who were in the system during the burnout years. Just before we close, how are they dealing now?
So we've been able to provide the service, and that was upfront. We had the team at the university, and we had our personal numbers given out, and we responded immediately. Unfortunately, I too have colleagues who we lost, who succumbed to the illness by virtue of their work and exposure to, we're not exempt. And so that's unfortunate. It's what we do for work, and so we don't see some persons and not see others. Unfortunately, that's one of the risks associated with our work. And, we really grieve for the families of those persons. But very happy for those who are able to help, and they're still in the system and doing well, got the time they require, the management they require, and are able to continue to give service to our country.
Absolutely, but we don't believe that just because a population is dealing with this, that those frontline workers aren't also themselves dealing with this. But Dr. Winston Delahaye, consultant psychiatrist, thank you for your insight this evening inside Lead Story. All right, we'll take a break and come back to you. We're going all the way to Paraguay with our reporter on the ground, Amoy Harriet, next inside Lead Story.
Watagwan.
Watagwan.
Datagwan.
Watagwan.
Watagwan. Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays at 8 a.m., 1:30 p.m., and 10 p.m. on CVM TV.
Let's delve deep into the issues. We'll take you beneath the surface.
Greetings and salutations. My name is Orville Higgins, and it's another edition of Fan Central.
Talking to the people at the heart of the top sporting stories. Hear from your favorite sportsmen and women and the administrators who work tirelessly to make it all happen. It's live sports talk.
I've written an entire article.
Yes.
Looking at all the major issues every Tuesday at 9 p.m. It's Fan Central.
The internationally acclaimed On Stage with Winfred Williams.
At a new time, Saturdays at 8 p.m. on CVM TV.
So much more than entertainment.
We now turn to the international economic conversation because the Inter-American Development Bank Group is holding its annual meetings in Asunción, Paraguay, a gathering that brings together governments and development leaders across the region. The discussions taking place there will help shape how countries like Jamaica finance infrastructure, climate resilience, and economic growth. Our correspondent with the most, Amoy Harriet, is there on the ground in Paraguay and speaks with us now. Hi, Amoy.
Hi, Jody. Hello. Good night, viewers.
Amoy, you're on the ground there in Asunción, capital of Paraguay. What's the atmosphere there at the Inter-American Development Bank meeting so far?
It has been tense, but in a good way. The participants, attendees at the meeting so far, everyone, is focused, and you see that collaboration between all the attendees and participants in getting or achieving one specific goal. Everyone that's attending the meetings from now till Saturday has one goal in mind, and you can literally feel that energy when you're on the ground.
All right, Amoy, you're far away from home. For viewers here in Jamaica watching you or around the world watching CVM, what exactly happens at these annual meetings that you had to go all the way to Paraguay for them? And why do these things matter for countries like Jamaica?
So to put it plainly for our viewers, this is the idea I've put in my head to kind of understand the whole essence of the IDB Group annual meetings. This is where the big dogs go to talk about money, where to spend the money, why to spend the money, how to spend the money. And this is very, very important for Jamaica, where conversations around our economy, growing our economy, improving our daily lives, the quality of life for Jamaicans and everyone that's affected, every country that's involved in this. This is a very, very important conversation for us because we want to see projects, we want to see developments that we know can better the lives of Jamaicans. The conversations like things that you wouldn't expect to be spoken about at the IDB group annual meetings. Road. We complain all the time, so we want better roads. This is a conversation that will at some point come up in the meetings from now until Saturday. I know that sometimes, and I'm speaking for myself here, just as a regular citizen, when we hear conversations around growing the economy, and we hear about the GDP, and we hear about the money, and we hear about the financing, and all those big words and the big conversations, we can sometimes tone out, but I think it's important for Jamaicans and everyone across the Caribbean, everyone across the Latin American and Caribbean region to pay close attention to these conversations because they can, like I mentioned earlier, trickle down to our quality of life, how we're living on a daily basis. The outcomes of these meetings will determine what our government will be putting in place, what projects they'll be pursuing, what initiatives they'll be pursuing, and how exactly the IDB group will be supporting those projects and initiatives.
You've spoken about those GDP conversations, and more we've been having those. Budget was read yesterday, the beginning of the budget debate here, opened by Finance and Planning Minister Favour Williams, speaking with us about that. But that also is why we don't have a heavy presence on the ground, we understand. And I know that you spoke with Director General of the Planning Institute of Jamaica, Wayne Henry, on that. Let's take a listen to what he said.
So it's a good observation. So two things. One, in Jamaica's case, these meetings are always at this time. And so yes, and so the IDB the president visited just after the hurricane, engaged with us, very valued partner, and they've been very long standing in terms of support. And they accepted that tender of apology for our minister because it tends to happen this time, and in our case we have our budget at this time. So that's something of sufficient importance that we all agree our minister is going to be absent. So we've been able to and have been privileged to represent. But we understand, and for a number of our Caribbean neighbors, that may be a similar case. But importantly, the Caribbean has agitated for greater engagement as a Caribbean with the IDB, and the IDB has responded. So before this AGM is what they call the pre-AGM, and not many people are aware that the IDB has been meeting for years now with the governors, the Caribbean governors. Every finance minister is a governor of the IDB as a member country, and they have been engaging with us. So our minister did engage maybe 2 weeks ago, right? And in this pre-AGM, and the Caribbean presence, it was for Caribbean governors, tremendous support. So maybe some persons have said, because we engage so fully and meaningfully at that stage, because we may have other competing issues, we may not come up. So, and so that could be some, but to be fair to both the bank and the governors, there has been strong engagement over many years because the bank has facilitated what we call a pre-AGM meeting with governors from the Caribbean.
And I think that's so important for us to then get a big picture from him on Amoy. Talk to us. You're on the ground. What are the big themes dominating the discussion this year? So is it climate? Is it digital economy, infrastructure, something else?
Jody, it's actually all of the above. Option D, all of the above. In addition to what the IDB president, Elon Golfan, says, he wants to have this year's meetings kind of incorporating the private sector a lot more. So there will be a lot of seminars that
Amoy is talking to us.
The IDB group.
So Amoy, your audio with us isn't so clear as we're speaking with you on that, as you're talking to us, but you said all of the above. So she said climate, infrastructure, digital. Those are all things that are coming up there as well. Let's quickly take a listen. Amoy, set this up for us. There's a woman there talking about Jamaica as a great example, and Jamaicans like hearing that we name abroad for good things. Talk to us about this so we can help our viewers understand what the meetings you've been attending and what you've been seeing on the ground.
So the woman that
to say something that is that many of the countries in the region have invested important amounts of resources and have innovated in many ways to reduce crime in the region. And this has been very effective. Not only in Jamaica, Jamaica is an example that we are using some of the policies that Jamaica has implemented, we are using it in other countries, but many other countries in Latin America and the Caribbean have done important innovations to combat crime and to control crime. But here we are talking about something that is important, is that it is not only crime as such, but it's also violent criminal organizations. Criminal organizations are expanding not only in Latin America and the Caribbean, but in many other regions of the world. And this poses a new challenge that we need to tackle. And criminal organizations previously were concentrated in just a few countries of Latin America and the Caribbean, and now they are expanding to other countries of Latin America and the Caribbean. And of course, this is a new challenge. So I would not say that we have not been effective. We have, in fact, and we can show many examples of success. But now we have a new challenge, and it's a new challenge that we need to tackle. And here at the IDB group, we are ready. We are ready to help the countries move forward.
That's the Vice President talking to us there of the IDB, giving us that response. Amoy, just before we close, you have about 10 seconds. What should Jamaica pay attention to as you give us live reports from Paraguay at the IDB group meetings?
Simply, what projects, what developments are coming out of these meetings? Listen closely to see how these projects and these developments are related to issues that you know are affecting your community, that you know are affecting your family members, your friends, and even yourself.
And that's Amoy Harriet. They're live on the ground in the capital of Paraguay, Asuncion, for the Inter-American Development Bank Group meetings. Amoy will be with us all week, so thanks Amoy for today and helping us figure out what's going on. All right.
Thank you so much, Jody.
Of course. From gun trafficking to medical missions to global pandemics, even what's going on at the IDB. They may all seem unrelated, but they all raise the same question about the state capacity and state responsibility. Can Jamaica protect its borders against transnational criminal networks? Can it defend labor rights and human rights while also maintaining a functional health system? Can it address the social trauma of a global pandemic that changed how we live and relate to each other? And can it position itself in a global economy where development financing is increasingly competitive? These are not just policy questions. These are questions about how the state balances security, human rights, and economic reality. And the answers to shape them will shape the country Jamaicans live in for years to come. That is the story. I'm Jody Ann Quarry, and on behalf of the entire CVM production team, thank you for watching Lead Story. Have a fantastic evening, and I hope you stay safe. Up next, CVM News.